remember how President Obama wanted to restore science to its rightful place? You know, because all our God lovers, we eat science. What's that? That's spooky stuff. He wanted to put it ahead of all ideology, and at least he's consistent. His new science czar once wrote a book. You can't get it anywhere except, surprisingly, in universities. Like, we got this one from Columbia. He once wrote with very little disapproval about using forced sterilization for population control. Mark Hemingway is a contributing writer to the National Review Online. Mark, I have been following this guy for the last week on the radio show, and another czar that we have. And true or false, two of the most frightening people that you have seen come through in government in a very long time?
Oh, I think that's absolutely true. The stuff that is contained in that book that Obama science czar John Holdren wrote some 30 years ago is just absolutely beyond the pale.
Right.
As far as we know, he has never renounced any of it. I mean, it was still on his CV very recently.
Yeah, he still had it on his resume. He just recently took it off.
Yeah, it is a really astonishing book, and one other interesting thing about the book is that it was co-written by a guy named Paul Ehrlich, who is a scientific laughingstock. I mean, the guy spent decades making nothing but doom and gloom predictions that turned out to be entirely false.
He just said that every bit of oceanic life that was worth anything would be wiped out and dead by 1980. But yeah, laughing stock. He was close. Let me give a couple of highlights here. This is what he says from Holdren's book. He says, of course, a government might, this is about coercive sterilization. Of course, a government might require only implantation of a contraceptive capsule, leaving its removal to the individual's discretion, but requiring re-implantation after childbirth. We sound like China. Then the next one. This is about putting sterilization stuff in drinking water. To be acceptable, such a substance would have to meet some rather stiff requirements. It must be uniformly effective. It must be free of dangerous or unpleasant side effects, and it must have no effect on members of the opposite sex, children, and old people, also pets or livestock. So he doesn't mind making men sterile as long as, you know, Fluffy isn't hurt.
Right. Think of the livestock. I mean, that's what we really have to be concerned about here. I mean, sterilizing agents in the drinking water, it's like they watched Dr. Strangelove and said, this is a how-to manual. I mean, it's nuts.
He, you know, I will tell you, I read James Rowland. Now, granted, this is a novel, but he's got a lot of stuff that I went out and I looked it all up. Have you ever heard of the company Epicite? It's no longer in business. Do you know it?
No, I do not, actually.
Look it up. You want to see some correlation here. Epicite in 2001, in fact, this was a news story on September 9th, 2001. That's why most people don't know this. They were experimenting with corn that could be a contraceptive. And it was experimented on, et cetera, and then the company got out on September 9th, 2001, and then the whole thing just kind of disappeared and went away. The company was eventually sold, but when Holdren says nobody's working on this, that's not true. In 2001, Epicite was working on corn as a contraceptive and having a contraceptive capability in corn. These people are nuts.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. There's no question about that. But one of the things that amazes me about this Holdren thing is, I mean, it's right there in black and white. I mean, the man signed his name to all of this, and yet there's been almost no media attention. His nomination was announced back in December. No one did any due diligence. In fact, the New York Times ran a fawning article when they announced his name. Just last week, the New York Times ran an article saying that there was, the headline was, there was, quote, some concern about Obama's the man who was going to appoint to head up the National Institute of Health. Now, why is there some concern? It's because the article said that some scientists were concerned because even though that the man he had nominated was responsible for mapping the human genome, one of the greatest scientific achievements in human history, he was a Christian. And some scientists had a problem with that. And the New York Times dutifully reported this.
Let me give you this. Here's another one, America, you haven't heard about. Mark Hemingway. Mark Hemingway is I mean, he was on the streets of the Rodney King riots. He goes to jail. In his own words, give me the from the East Bay Express. This is liberal rag. He says, I met all these young radical people of color, I mean really radical, communist and anarchist, and it was like, this is what I need to be part of. I was a rowdy nationalist on April 28th, and then the verdicts came down on the 29th. By August, I was a communist. This guy is talking about, what, 15 years ago? He was a radical communist. He starts these programs up, he starts becoming radical on the streets, and now he's a green jobs czar. What happened to the communist thing?
Who knows? I mean, but it is terrifying to think that, look, we all believe that we, need to make environmental progress, whatever differences we have, whether or not we believe in anthropogenic global warming or not. But the fact of the matter is environmental advances are only going to be made if we take into account, economic incentives. And if you have a guy who's a green czar that is, maybe dictating environmental policy that doesn't believe in free markets, then, disaster is going to ensue.
Bow to our new god, Obama. Back in a second.